Hey everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to Lead Your Movement. I'm Angelique Rewers, CEO and founder of The Corporate Agent. And this is our weekly show where we talk to entrepreneurs, business owners, and business leaders who are using their platform in order to drive positive change in the world. And when we think about all the things that are going on in the world today, we could not have picked a better topic to talk about than what's happening for employees right now inside of organizations. But before I get into more of that, let me just share a couple of super important announcements with all of you. The first is that this show actually will go on a summer hiatus. I take a lot of time off in summer. I know you guys hopefully do as well. So, our last show before we're into sort of the thick of summer will be Wednesday, June 2nd. And we have a very exciting episode in store for you that day. We're going to be interviewing on Wednesday, June 2nd, retired NASA astronaut Jose Hernandez. Now, Jose is the son of migrant workers from Mexico. His parents worked in the vineyard fields out in California. And after applying to NASA 11 times and being rejected all 11 times, he decided to apply one more time to the astronaut program at NASA. And on that 12th and final attempt, he was accepted into the program and did, in fact, go to outer space, which, as many of you I think know, not everyone who even gets into the astronaut program has the opportunity to leave this planet. So we're going to be talking to him on June 2nd about his life, what it's like to grow up with a family that's traveling back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico, to be the first in his family to go on to do something like this, the leadership lessons that he has learned, the lessons of persistence. We're going to talk to him about the overview effect. For those of you who don't know what that is, I encourage you to look that up. You want to change your perspective, please understand the overview effect. And we're going to be talking to him about his latest venture, where he is breaking new ground in an industry that is lacking in diversity and what he's doing there. It's going to be an absolutely phenomenal conversation. When I had a chance to hear him speak, couple of months ago. I think I laughed and cried through the entire 30 minutes. So it's going to be incredible. June 2nd, 1 p.m. Eastern, live right here. And then that'll be our final episode before we take a summer hiatus. We also need to make some space for some really exciting announcements. Big announcements that we have coming up this summer. The other thing I just want to share is if you do not already have your registration to the Real Deal 2021, which is happening October 4, 5, and 6 in Fort Lauderdale, now is the time to register. Hundreds of people have already claimed the registration for this event. This is a fully 100% in person conference. We do many things virtually, including this show, but there's also a time to gather and to be together. And so we are doing an exclusively in person. This is not a hybrid event. This is a fully in person conference on the beach at the Westin Fort Lauderdale Beach Resort, October 4, 5, and 6. Right now, you can register for a really low rate because it's basically our super early bird. And that expires on May 31st. So if you're coming, just get your ticket now and then join us in October. It's going to be amazing. All right. Speaking of doing things in person, speaking of that, really, you can't go to any major media outlet today. You can't NBC News, Yahoo News, Washington Post, CNN, HuffPost, HBR, Wall Street Journal. I mean, pretty much any publication that you go to right now has at least one article on the homepage somewhere talking about what is going on for employees, what is going on for companies right now, the psychological and effect of the pandemic on our mental health and our mental well-being, how employees are feeling, the amount of stress that employees are facing, and the lasting impact that we're all going to experience from the pandemic, as well as the announcements from companies. Are their employees wearing masks? Are they not wearing masks? Are they returning to the office? Are they not returning to the office? what we saw on the front end of the pandemic pales in comparison to the level of confusion, chaos, conflict, and stress that organizations and employees are going to be feeling over the next 12 to 18 months, because the dust has a ways to go before it settles. And so, to help us really make sense of all of this and help us understand long term what organizations need to do, as well as short term what organizations need to do, I kind of called in the big guns for this one, for this discussion. So I'm really excited about this. Our guest today is author, leadership futurist, executive coach, and CEO and founder of Balance Integration Corporation, Tevis Trower, a pioneer in optimizing corporate cultures from the top down. Heralded in best-selling Megatrends 2010 as corporate mindfulness guru for the new millennium, and called a breath of fresh air in leadership development by Forbes. Over her long career, Tevis has assisted powerful organizations ranging from Disney to Morgan Stanley and many, many in between, in order to help them optimize their most precious asset, humanity. Serving clients in over 70 US markets, Europe, and Latin America, Tevis has facilitated global executive immersions, keynotes, and panels for prestigious organizations, including Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, YPO, Conscious Capitalism, Pier 150, PwC, KKR, Soros, Bloomberg, Viacom, Google, and The Economist, on issues including work self integration, wholeness based leadership, mindfulness, resiliency, mastery, innovation, and radical success. You can find profiles and expert advice from Tevis featured in media outlets like Forbes, Fortune, Business Week, Glamour, Yoga, Journal, CIO, Pink, Real Simple, Cranes, New York Post, Financial Times, Women's Wear Daily, MSNBC, Fox Business, New York One, and even CNN, as well as her book, The Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success, with which Forbes listed as one of the top 12 books for compassionate leadership. As an NYU faculty member, she teaches business creativity and personal mastery. She's also served as resident resiliency expert to WebMD and HuffPost. Her board service includes American Diabetes Association, New York Yoga Teachers Association, and Conscious Capitalism New York City. Tevis lives what she teaches from her homes in Woodstock and Chelsea, New York City, enjoying story slamming, surfing, snowboarding, playing guitar, and doing something I hope you'll never have to endure hearing me do, singing. Tevis, welcome to Lead Your Movement. I will let you serenade everyone. As someone who's tone deaf, I will not do that.
Well, I mean, given the topic we're tackling, I'd say row, row, row your boat
I love
gently
it.
down the stream.
I love it. I love it. I really did call in the big guns for this conversation because holy crap, organizations are in a lot of trouble right now. I don't think they've ever faced something like this. So, to that end, what is the movement that you and your team are leading?
We are leading a movement towards wholeness. The entire conversation around what is our culture about, around DEI, around how do we navigate the hybrid workplace, all of these questions we feel like can be approached through a lens of wholeness. And when you ask, like, what the hell does that mean? We know what wholeness isn't. And I think that's a lot of what we see when we look at the dysfunctions in corporations. And so it becomes really an easy way to kind of enter into what's our goal and what are we going to work towards.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that we do know what it isn't. And employees, I just, one of the things that's always I found very interesting, and anytime you're having a discussion around culture inside of organizations, is that employees are not stupid. Right? Like employees are not, it's kind of like even in Hollywood, they have this debate over how smart is the audience and do we really need to treat our audience like they're stupid, right? John Krasinski, for example, when he did the Quiet Place movie, he didn't explain a lot of things. He assumed his audience was intelligent enough to fill in the holes. And yet I do feel like we still aren't giving employees the credit that they deserve,
Yeah.
because when a leadership team says one thing but then everywhere else in the organization is failing to live up to that,
Yeah.
employees can see that. So can you just talk to that for a
Yeah.
minute?
Well, so I have been in this space since 2002. I started the company because I was really curious. Why is it that we all fight our entire lives to land these jobs in amazing, amazing companies? We get the pedigree, we get the degree, we learn the language, we know how to dress and, do our function, and within a year or two we hate our jobs. Like,
Mm,
what is going on that the honeymoon period is not only so short, but that something that we could aspire to for decades and craft our entire lives around quickly becomes a nightmare. And that really pointed me towards culture, because the reality is that when we have a collection of human beings, what surfaces as the common experience, yes, it's created by everyone present, but as you and I both know, it's really influenced by the people who hold the power. And the assumption oftentimes present that people are going to put up with feeling less than human, or feeling like a commodity, or feeling replaceable, is kind of outdated. And it's been outdated for a long time. The gap that's been opened by the marketplace fluidity of talent right now is that people are finally acting on it. They
mm,
finally feel the ability and the pain point. You brought up fear.
yeah.
They feel the ability to act beyond fear, because the fears right now are greater than, will I have a paycheck? The fears right now
Mm.
are, what is my life going to look like over the next year and a half? And being able to navigate forward as opposed to navigating back is what everyone has on their mind.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about that is we're somewhat at an inflection point for a lot of these companies because, I said at the outset of the show that you can't go to a website right now, any of the major news outlets, and not find something sort of talking about this idea of how do companies move forward? What are we going to do moving forward coming out of this? One of the articles I shared with you in the green room is from a publication called The Conversation, which
Yeah.
is a much they tend to do much lengthier pieces, which I love. It's not this sort of cursory look at an issue. They really kind of get into it. This article that came out this morning is titled Employees Are Feeling Burned Over Broken Work from Home Promises and Corporate Culture BS
Yeah.
as employers try to bring them back to the office, as employers are
Yep.
trying to bring employees back to the office. And I think the problem is, like, I'm getting this sense, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong and what we need to understand about this. But in so many ways, I feel like the employees have all had this really pivotal life sort of a reaffirming experience. They're changing where they want to live. They don't want to be commuting. They want to have more time with their pets and their spouses and their kids and their family and all of these things and yoga and whatever they want to do. And all of a sudden now companies like, oh, our numbers have dropped below 30,000 here in the US. We have new mask requirements. You know what? Let's just get everybody back into the office. And it's almost like I feel like we're on two different planets right now.
Yeah. 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 Well, you brought up a really important phrase, and that is corporate BS, right? And
Mhm.
this is the kind of words that folks like me who go in and consult and talk about wholeness, we're pretty earnest. And when a tragedy happens or a crisis happens, suddenly the folks, let's call them the wisdom keepers within the organizations, are somewhat empowered to really drive home these concepts, right? And that's what's happened over the past year. And I would argue it was starting to happen even earlier.
Mm.
But so these words start to take hold, and you get the C-suite, and everyone's hearing these concepts, and we have a different virus from coronavirus, and that is the virus of heads nodding.
Mhm.
Right? We all hear words like humanity, and we hear words like diversity, and we hear words like collaboration and transparency and empathy and authenticity and and all the E's,
Yep.
right? And everyone around the Zoom room, the conference room table is like, yeah, I believe in humanity. Oh, yeah. And because none of us think we're the problem. Like,
Right.
we hear those words and we're like, "Oh, yeah, I already get all that." Now, I really hope Mike finally gets his ass handed to him because he's been a jerk for decades, right? Like, we
Right.
secretly think
Right.
that having these great awakenings, these verbal awakenings, these conversational awakenings are the crux of the solution, not even the problem, but the solution. But the point is, that's where the work begins. As hard as it is to even have those conversations, it took a pandemic for a lot of
Oh,
companies
yeah.
to even entertain the possibility that you could trust employees to be productive from home. What?
So true. It's so true.
What?
In fact,
They
you know
have
what?
integrity? I'm
It
paying people who have integrity? What?
That's right, that's right. Yeah, and they're shocked. They're shocked. I mean, I was actually talking to a leader in a pretty big brand. I mean, big, big. And we were talking, and she said, "You know what, Angelique, that is so disheartening because she's a pretty high up senior leader. She's not in the C-suite, but she's up there, you know." And she said, "You know what's really disheartening to me right now is that here we've proven that our employees are getting so much done, in many cases more productive, and they're happier being home. And all the C-suite keeps talking about is when we can have them back in the office because they still don't trust their own employees." And she's like, "It's just so disheartening because if we were ever going to prove it, I feel like we just did.
Yeah.
So like what would it take? There is no answer because if this isn't going to do it, then what's going to do it?" I think, do you think it's generational though? I mean, do you think that to some degree we just need another like 15 years of retirements before we have sort of the next big breakthrough?
There's an argument to be made there that that while the Xers came into the workforce and probably had a lot of these values and ideas in place, numbers wise, they were too small. And the boomers had already been co opted by the command and control thinking of the traditionalists. And so some theorists say that it will take the millennials and beyond to really allow for a more humanistic viewpoint of work and a more trusting viewpoint of, I'm paying these people, I should trust them, right? um, I think it's a couple things, honestly. I think that that leadership culture is populated. Think about what it takes to be a leader. You have to want it, and you have to go through a lifetime basically of curating yourself, right? Of saying, what do
Mm.
I have to be? What do I have to be? What do I have to be? So you're so tightly customizing and curating your identity to fit in. Now, what are we trying to fit into? We're trying to fit into some ideas of what corporate culture is. And whether it's the fleece bro culture of Silicon Valley or whether it's the mahogany and MoMA art culture of the financial district, right?
Mhm.
Every culture has its norms and mores. And so when we think about how much pretending comes into play. There have been studies of psychopathic behavior, and the incidence of psychopathic behavior amongst corporate leaders is 3x that of the general population. Now there's a bunch of studies, I can send you some. But before you think, oh, they're psycho killers, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you chunk down what are the hallmarks of that behavior, it really becomes about I manipulate, right? I control,
Mm.
I bully, right? I do these things that in polite society would not be accepted, but in corporate society, it's considered the hallmark of leadership. These same people have severed their relationship with themselves in such a way that it makes it possible to make that gap exist while they're climbing the ladder, right, etc. But this is why this it's really a renaissance, right? Let's spin this in a positive way. This is a renaissance, a rebirth, a reassessment, a reckoning of what it is to truly be a leader of human beings.
Mm.
And to be a leader of human beings, you have got to be a whole human being yourself, because people are fluid. They see what's going on. They are not stupid. And they will do what they need to do to live a life that makes them feel both respected and valued and well compensated. So that's really that's what we see is going to be happening.
I love that. I love what Beatrice just said too. She said, I think so many managers fear the loss of control in seeing their employees at every turn. And you just brought that up. You just brought that up as one of those sort of habits. And then I think, it's hard for leaders sometimes, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
remember when I was in corporate, and actually, I'm going to go back to something you said at the very beginning because I've never heard anybody put it quite that way before, Tevis. And it like part of my life flashed before my eyes. But I think that one of the problems that I had, I remember in one of my roles, was that I had employees who would just do whatever they wanted, like whatever they wanted, no matter what I said, no matter what we like agreed to, they would go and be like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that," and go do what they wanted to do. And part of that company's culture was there was no repercussion. There was
Oh,
no repercussion. Like leaders had absolutely no authority to do anything. If an employee, like if we agreed, this is the vendor we're going to go with, and this is like, we're not going to do this trade show, we're going to do that trade show. And then the employee goes and doesn't sign the contract and signs the other contract instead. Like there was no repercussion for, and these weren't
mm,
like, oh, I want a comma after that word and you didn't put a comma. I mean, these were like, I'm
egregious.
gonna go
Yeah.
spend $10,000 over here, even though Angelique told me I couldn't, and I'm gonna go do it. And there was zero repercussion. And I think there's a little bit of that left over in some company cultures where
Mm,
they don't know how to actually create any accountability. And so I remember as a leader at that point, like trying to grasp at like, how am I going to like have
yeah.
any degree of control? How am I even supposed to lead my department if my employees can literally do anything they want with zero repercussion? And I think I think we forget sometimes that there are company cultures out there that are so toxic and so antiquated. Like it's like it's a zoo. I mean, it's a circus. It's like a circus and a zoo had a baby. I mean, it's just lunacy out there. What do those leaders do in those organizations coming
Yeah.
out of this mess of the
I
last 60
well,
months?
I've worked with some of those companies, and they are not so far flung and secret.
Yeah, right, right.
Some of them are really famous, and they're famous
Yes,
for their
yes, these are
culture.
famous companies, yes.
They're famous for their culture, but you look under the blankets and you go, "What is going on?"
Like,
So
what? No, it's crazy. I mean, it's
yeah,
literally you cannot make up the stories, like, you cannot make it up.
but I think that's the whole thing about the heads nodding, and I think that when you ask the question, "What can a company do?" For one thing, I'm gonna tell you what not to do. Don't think that you're going to fix this by appointing a 6 or 7-figure salary to some poor, unsuspecting, highly emotionally intelligent and business savvy human being who's probably going to be female or black or gay or Latino, whatever, and bring them in and call them a chief cultural officer. Right? And say, "Here's your budget. We are so excited to have you at the C-suite table because you're gonna make all these people problems go away because we have real work to
Right,
do."
and we can just blame you when it doesn't. Now we have someone to
Exactly.
blame.
Exactly. Because that's what happened. Basically, people read whatever survey, Gallup, you name it, right?
Oh, yeah.
They read the metrics and they said, "Well,
Oh,
we need to prove to everyone that we take our culture seriously. So we're going to make a C-suite position and we're going to give them some budget
Yes.
and they're going to find some apps.
Yep. And we're gonna put out a press release so everyone can get a
Exactly.
gold star. Yeah.
And we're gonna have some employee resource groups, and we're gonna put some great headshots of people who don't look like people would have looked 30 years ago, and tell ourselves our job is done.
Yeah.
Don't do it. The real work is you people in the C-suite figuring out what are the unconscious assumptions that you are bringing in to what it means to be successful. Because that is really the crux. And that's why I talk about the concept of radical success, because we have every culture, again, whether it's the bro dudes in Silicon Valley or the financial district, right? We all have unconscious assumptions about what it means to win. We have it personally and we bring it into the collective conversation. And until we bring that into consciousness and we start to look at what suffering and inefficiency it creates in our own lives as well as in the collective, all these great initiatives, and believe me, I've created tons of them for companies. I mean, I am guilty as charged. Until we bring personal action, personal change amongst the people who shape daily experiences for everyone within the organization, until we do that, these folks who are spending the money and getting the apps and doing the DEI and blah, 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 they're basically acting as a pressure valve, point one. Point two, they are fostering eventually that boomerang of the company getting smacked in the head because, as you've said, employees are not stupid. They know when there's blood in the water. They know when they're not safe.
Yep. They do. I think that workplace safety is a big one. Um, that idea of, I really can't lead the way I want to lead because then I'm vulnerable. I'm at risk. I'm going to get ran over. I'm going to be bullied by. So, like, I have to project
Yeah.
a certain manufactured demeanor
Yeah.
in order to maintain I mean, it is a very zero sum game, right? Like, that's the feeling. It's a very sort of fear based game of like either gaining ground or losing ground and power struggles inside of organizations. I want to ask you a question. I don't mean to throw you a curveball, but I've always been really curious about something. And this is like me, Angelique, asking this question. I've always wondered who in the market, like categorically, is doing a certain type of work around culture. And I'm curious if you know, and I don't mean like name a brand, but like who it is that's supposed to be doing this work. What's really interesting, I find about culture, because having worked with companies around sort of culture pushback on certain things and being in corporate and involved in corporate and culture initiatives, there's the level of work that happens at sort of the C-suite and even the level down, all the executive vice presidents who have P&L responsibility, all those business units. But no matter how amazing the work is that happens, Tevis, at those levels,
Mhm.
if certain issues, like really brass tacks issues, aren't handled inside the organization,
Yeah.
like who to go to get a definitive answer on a damn question, or like who can make like actually have authority to decide what we're doing and get like, that's a hard thing if you're a director in a company and you're trying to make something better, but no one even knows who the hell can give you a yes.
Yeah.
It's very hard to affect positive change. Is your organization doing that kind of work as well? Is that another category of service provider? Because it does seem like a lot of this culture stuff breaks down as people are trying to execute, because authority breaks down,
Yeah.
ownership, accountability, communication channels. Like, who's doing that work to fix that level of bullshit inside of a company?
I think you have to look for organizations who take it from the level that I'm talking about and then say, okay, great. Once we've catalyzed a sense of wholeness at the top, then how do we cascade this throughout the organization in such a way that there is an infrastructure and accountability? And whether you want to call them a KPI or you've got your own way to kind of phrase that, so many companies are operating without even the basic infrastructure
Mhm.
around how to make a decision. What are
Right,
our
right.
priorities?
How do you
Like,
make a
it,
decision? Right.
it, it's really, really basic stuff. It's so funny. Years ago, I did like a think tank talking about leadership with Peter Senge, right? And we're
I
all
love
sitting in
it.
our cushy chairs in
Oh,
Boston,
yes. The big leather
on
chairs. Yes.
Cambridge.
Yes.
And there's a guy there, and he was a colonel and at the Army War College, right? Where they send everyone to
Oh,
learn
yeah.
how to be a leader before
Oh,
they
yeah.
send them out to battle. And he said, even them, this is 15 years ago. He said, we have learned how to empower, how to give the folks on the ground the
Wow.
ability to make a decision. And I said, how did you do that? How
Yeah.
did you get over the command and control? And he said, because we had no choice. They have access to information. They have access to real-time impact. Now, if you think about this as a company, it's what about our customer service policies are making us lose clients and hemorrhage money, right? Like,
Mhm.
what about our approach to marketing is totally off base with where the marketplace is going and
Yep.
it's being informed by data from 10 years ago or whatever,
Yep.
right? There's so many ways that by turning to the ingenuity within the organization and by accessing it through thoughtful structure. Hello.
And that I feel like that's the part they forget to do too. I mean,
Yeah,
like you said, literally what's missing inside of most organizations is even a framework for how we make decisions
yeah,
and letting the people who actually are on the front lines make the decisions. I mean, in many ways it is interesting to look at the military because I'm a history buff. I love all things history, particularly modern history. And if you watch documentaries and things on World War I, World War II,
yeah,
for example, the bottom line is when you're in the fog of war, your commanders on the front end have to make decisions. Like they have to make decisions. Either they make a decision or they die. Like that's kind of
mhm,
that is like the have to piece of it that you were just talking about. And I think there is a sense of if other organizations can do it and they can give people this is the priority of how to make a decision. And also there are going to be times when it's not in the manual. Like, see, right now we're sort of operating outside the manual. No one has had to try to recover from a global pandemic who's in leadership right now. Like that's not a thing. There is no manual. So we're now operating outside the manual. In some regards, I think people like you can kind of look a little bit and be like, see, we freaking told you to fix this. Like,
everyone loves
we
to hear
told
that.
you it's okay. Like, I do feel like if you're a culture or a leadership expert, you get to wear an I told you so t-shirt through 2025. Like that's your
I
right
want
to
my
do it.
shirt. I
You
want my
need a
shirt, damn
shirt.
it.
I told you so. But I do think that there is a sense of look, you can have a strategy. You've got to figure out what your values are. You've got to figure out how you're going to do this. But where employees, I think, get really ticked off is they talk about culture and they make these decisions, but then they don't operationalize it. They don't create the
Yeah.
infrastructure around it. They don't bring it down to the front line. What would you say to organizations who want to do that right now? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You've worked with some of the biggest brands out there. You've helped them turn or bathtubs around, battleships around in a bathtub. You've helped them do that. What do you want them? What are some of the things you want them to do right now? Obviously, working with your
Yeah.
organization is a smart one. What are some of the
Yes.
things that they should be thinking about? They should be doing right now.
So I think the big thing I've been walking around and thinking about is that why is lovely. Asking
Mm,
ourselves the why is lovely. I know so many people, this concept has changed their lives, and I think that's lovely. I'm interested in something else. Once we know our why, once we have our BHAG, whatever flavor du jour thing you are rallying around as a company, then then you need to shift the conversation that every single person present and is asking themselves, how?
Mm,
How do I align with this? How do I align with this? How do I align with this? Because when we're saying in the heat of the moment, I had to make a choice and I asked myself, how do I live up to the why right now? Then I've aligned with the core truth of what the organization has put forward. If you don't A, give me that, right? And B, invite me to use my powers of reason to actually apply it. I mean, that's where employee engagement goes up,
mhm.
right? That's where discretionary effort goes up. That's where contribution goes up. That's where problem solving goes up, right? All those things go up when you say, look, we've told you the strategy, we've told you the priorities, we've given you the infrastructure and guidelines, and you're going to have to make a lot of choices in the heat of the moment. And there's one thing I want you to ask yourself, how? What is the best way? If I can't get an answer and I have to move forward, what is the best way for me to live up to what I know that we're going for? But that does require the courage of transparent conversation about what the corporate strategy is, what the priorities are.
Do you think that companies need to be more willing to let go of those folks who do not want to be part of the solution?
Yes, instantly. Good. Fare thee well,
Fare thee
my
well.
sweetheart. Fare thee well.
Fare thee
Yes.
well. And I think
Hire
that,
hire
that takes the—
slow, fire
go ahead.
fast. Hire
Yes.
slow, fire fast.
Yeah, well, and so that really takes, though, the will of the senior leaders to do that, right? Because it's very, otherwise people just get moved or the problem just gets shuffled around on the board, right? Like the
Yeah.
problem just keeps getting shuffled around and you continue to get these obstructors inside the organization. What do you tell your clients when it comes to the obstructionists?
When it comes to well, the problem I see is that when it is festering at the top, it will persist throughout. So when there are people being protected within the C-suite because of existing relationships, because of misguided loyalties, to be
Mm,
honest, um,
yep.
that's that's where we don't really mince words and we step forward and we say, look, you may want to play golf with this guy for the rest of your life. That's great. He is a cancer to your organization, or she is a cancer to your organization. So you've got to make a call here. And what's interesting is everyone knows who the cancers are.
Always. Always.
Always.
Always. Always. Like, it's not always.
We did some focus groups for one
Mhm.
of our clients, and the phrase brilliant assholes came up
Ah,
so many times. And the lamenting, this was a step under C-suite. The lamenting, why do we tolerate brilliant assholes? Because the asshole is always going to out impact the brilliance.
mhm.
And potentially there's brilliance present within the organization that doesn't get any breathing room because of the asshole within that person.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because it would suffocate what else is
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that
Well,
makes sense. I actually had a client. A big name, everybody would know who they are. And this executive vice president, when he walked into the organization, he had a no assholes policy.
yeah.
And he literally was like, "No assholes." And, he would ask, I swear to God, this is true. He would ask during an interview, "Are you an asshole?" And he would just ask them that and see what, because he asked me that when I went
Yeah.
in to talk to him about working with him. He's like, "Are you gonna be an asshole?" And I was like, That's a bold question," but I kind of was glad he asked it. And I remember sitting in a couple of his team meetings on
Mhm.
projects, Tevis, that we were working on, and he would literally look at someone and be like, "That's real asshole behavior right there, so cut it out or leave." And he really made it very black and white. It was one of the only times I ever saw anybody do that. Mostly, I worked in a sea of them in various
Yeah.
corporations. But that was really the first time that I saw someone just be like, we're just not going to tolerate it. Like, just get out. Like, if you're going to, and he would throw people out of meetings. If they had a bad day, he'd be like, get out. We'll try it again tomorrow, but get out. And
Wow.
it was a very courageous way to lead, but you don't really see that very often.
I have clients who have no asshole rules. I think it becomes a slippery slope when the assholes are bringing in a lot of money.
Yeah, it's hard to fire that, right?
Yeah, and I think that we turn a blind eye because we are so afraid of making a tough call.
Yeah.
And that is just human, right? Oh my God, what am I going to do without this person? And to that, my counsel would be to look at the costs of keeping that human around,
Mm.
right? Which sounds it's a that's such a duh
No,
thing
I mean,
to weigh.
I think a lot of people probably though miss the part that you were saying before, which is what other brilliance is being stifled because of it. I think
Yeah.
that's the one thing, right? Like when you make room, someone else will step up and shine.
Exactly. Well, this is so we've all talked about imposter syndrome, and you and I just spoke about people curating and trying to fit in and all that. I think there's a couple other things that happen, and that is the superhero syndrome, right? So you see Superman flying over the town, and all the people in the say, "Oh, Superman, save us!" Well, if Superman doesn't show up, then everybody in town has to get off their duff and figure out how to beat the bad guy.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And I kind of like that. I kind of like the ubiquity of superpowers. I like the ubiquity of the ability to pull together and to win. Because the other thing about the superpowers is what about the bad guys?
Mhm.
Because if the superpower power shows up and everyone goes, "Oh, save us." Well, if there's a really bad guy, what they actually do is create a halo effect that this is going to be tolerated.
Yes.
So it's the opposite impact of the superpower.
And I think that's the issue. I think we really, we are in that moment where companies have to decide what they're going to tolerate. My advice to companies, because we're involved in a couple of organizations that you would know that are looking at how to change company culture. And one thing I keep saying to them is, we have like this window of opportunity where we're not stuck in inertia at the moment. Inertia was blown up. Like inertia just got blown up. And so that's gone. So before though the cement has a chance to set again, right? Like the cement turner's still going. So it's all kind of loose right now and we can kind of decide, but eventually it's going to set in place. And do you want it to set in place as this sort of nice smooth culture that you want that's going to propel you into a world of AI and advanced robotics and advanced digital transformation that we just can't even, not to mention space and what's going on
Yeah.
with space. And do you want a culture that's going to be this like on ramp to the future, or basically do you want it to just be this garbled mess that gets you stuck in the year 20, actually for a lot of it I think they're still stuck in 1950. But what do you want to do? That's one of the things I think about as we wrap up. What did I not ask you that I should have asked you that you want to make sure that culture experts and organizations are thinking about right now?
I think that everyone is trying to figure out what's going to happen through the end of the year. And I think a couple things are going to happen. I think that some companies are going to toe the hard line and
Mm.
they're going to say, you have to get back to work. And so, for those of you who are trying to guide policy and you're getting pressure from the very top, for those of you who advise on compensation, for those of you who look at um, built uh, settings, right, for companies, I'm going to tell you to take some deep breaths because most companies are going to grossly misstep because they are going to be guided by this retrograde thinking.
Mm.
And I want all of you who have your hearts in the right place to take a deep breath and know that there will be a lot of missteps as we figure out the right strategy to approach. Me personally, I think within the next 5 years, work is largely going to be hybrid, period. And that what is going to happen is going to be a lot of really high end nesting. So when people talked about agile, right, agile was all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's actually what's going to happen is teams are going to fly in at pre-planned and oh my god, it's an emergency type of instance and they're going to come together for a day, 2 weeks, whatever, and they're going to stay in all inclusive so no one has to leave and they're going to have a wheatgrass juice if they need it, they're going to have yoga, they're going to have CrossFit, they're going to have anything and they are going to work together beautifully and then they're going to go back to their homes. And I think that this nesting is really going to become very normative. Um, so be patient with your organizations because the other thing about turning a battleship, bathtub or not,
The
bathtub or
we wear
not,
bathtubs too. We
it's a
do
s-
everything
yeah,
around
right.
here.
It's a slow process
Yeah.
and changing how people think. And bear in mind the fear fatigue, right? We were talking about
Mhm.
fear. There's a certain amount of fear that is called stress, and there's a certain amount that's called eustress, right? The positive stress, the amount of fear that makes you go, oh, I got to get up and do this, right? And right now we're kind of coming out of the distress of too much fear and we're moving into okay, I just got to regroup and then we're going to start to move into eustress a little bit. So be nice to yourself through this, stay super grounded. Don't spend too much time reading every freaking new theory coming out on LinkedIn because you're going to make yourself nuts.
Mm.
Spend more time just being present to what's happening in the organization and taking reflection time. And I know that I just shot myself in the head because I get paid for people to come and ask me my advice. But you backing up and giving yourself space to really see what's happening is one of the boldest leadership moves that you can do for your organization.
Oh man, what great advice because the reactive approach, just constantly living minute to minute to minute in this reactive place is really how organizations are getting themselves in trouble. A quick rant on my part because I just did an interview. I did an interview with a reporter yesterday on uh, what companies should do about returning employees to the office from a vaccine and masking kind of a perspective. And one of the things I said, Tevis, was, there was absolutely no way all of these retailers who changed their policy almost overnight when the CDC, announced their new guidance really had a chance to even talk to their managers at the stores or even train or communicate with them about what was happening. It happened so fast. There wasn't even time to, have that. So just giving yourself a chance to think. We don't really build in thinking time anymore. We think that like that's doing nothing, right? That's not getting anything done.
Mhm.
That's just such brilliant advice to kind of slow it down, back it up, think, contemplate, plan, talk to people, synthesize. I think you're one of the people, though, that they should be
Mhm.
talking to.
Thank you.
You really are the guru on mindfulness, wholeness, integration, inside. Really looking at these pieces in such a unique way. You have worked with major brands. I shared those at the beginning. If folks want to get in touch with you to have a conversation about their organization, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on balanceintegration.com and I welcome it. You're a history nerd. I'm a history nerd. We're both organization nerds. Let's just face
Yes,
it.
we
Yes.
are. We are. I
Geek
know. I
out on
kind
this
of drink
stuff.
this stuff for breakfast. I need a life. I'm going to have to take up snowboarding
You
and
come drum with me up
I'm
in
going to come drum.
Woodstock.
My husband's a drummer, by the way.
Oh, really?
My
You can join
husband's a
my
drummer.
rock
We
band.
do have a drummer. My husband has a brand new custom drum set, which, normally, Tevis, I'll tell you as we wrap up here, normally prior to the pandemic, he would play when the rest of us were out of the house because despite his soundproofing, it's very loud. And so we've been trapped in the house with a drummer for 15 months. So that's
Oh, that'll teach you how to meditate.
exactly. It's like I literally like I'll go outside and lay by the pool and the whole house is the glass. You can see it vibrating. I'm sure our
But
neighbors
come on,
love
he
us.
he comes out of that room so much happier.
Oh, so much happier. He's so much happier. It's really it's a really great thing. I might just go in and start, smacking the drums. But no, those are his pride and joy. But no, you and I will have to do get together when I can be back in the New York City metropolitan area at some point. I'll have to make sure I come and see you. But until then, I'm so glad you came and joined us and had this conversation. This is such an amazing time to be in the culture space right now. Like, this is a really exciting time, right? So, from that perspective, not from obviously a pandemic perspective, which has been
No.
nothing but, tragedy, but from an organizational perspective and looking to the future, it's an exciting time. The work you guys are doing is phenomenal. For those of you who have not read Tevis's book, I highly encourage you to get a copy. It'll help you as an entrepreneur and business leader in whatever field that you're in. This has been an amazing conversation. So thank you for this.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Angelique.
Awesome. We'll talk to you soon. And to everyone, remember, we'll be back next Wednesday at 1:00 for another amazing conversation. Next week we are talking about something we have never talked about on Lead Your Movement before. Something that companies are doing that I bet a lot of you don't know, that this is a big trend inside companies and could very easily be a way for you to reach more people inside of companies. It's quite fascinating. I didn't know that much about it myself until last year when I interviewed someone for something else we were doing, and it just blew my mind. So I think you're going to love it. And then the other thing, like I said, is June 2nd is our final episode before we break for the summer to have a little summer hiatus, which I think I have been, waiting to be able to take a vacation. So I'll be doing that. Plus, we have a huge announcement coming this summer, and we need to make a little space for that big announcement that I think you guys are all going to love and be really excited about. Don't forget to get your registration to The Real Deal, and that way we can see you in person October 4th, 5th, and 6th in Fort Lauderdale. The URL for that is realdealevent.com, realdealevent.com. All right, everybody, this is Angelique signing off. I will see you guys next Wednesday, 1 p.m. right here on LinkedIn. See you then.